Robbie, appreciate you making some time for us this morning. I know you picked against the Hogs in Stillwater. You picked against them in Chapel Hill, and now you're picking them in Omaha. What's been the biggest change, you think, from where they started postseason to where they're at now?
Well, Ty, hey, thanks for having me. I think, so I'm based in Nashville, and part of my job is to cover Vanderbilt, and I couldn't get that Vanderbilt series and then the Alabama series and, of course, SEC tournament out of my head when I was, looking through things when the NCAA tournament started. And for whatever reason, Arkansas just was not playing well down the stretch. I think one of the biggest reasons why I like where they're at is Connor Noland is actually, playing really well right now. He's been at his best, and I think that changes everything for Arkansas. They've got a legit ace right now, and that wasn't really the case down the stretch, and that's going to make a big difference. I think this is going to be a fantastic matchup on Saturday with Stanford because Connor Noland can go head-to-head with whoever the Cardinals throw out there.
And you mentioned Connor Noland. He kind of, as the team did, struggled in some later starts than what we were typically accustomed to from him this year, but he got his feet back under him. He got his arm back under him. And now he's starting to wheel and deal a little bit. Had a great outing against Grand Canyon, a great outing against North Carolina. Kind of based on what we've seen, I think you're expecting kind of similar situation for him against Stanford on Saturday. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. Stanford has a lot of good hitters, but they've been a little bit up and down. I think specifically, like during the postseason, they've looked a little bit vulnerable to me. They barely got out of their regional. And then they almost went down to UConn at the super regionals, and both of those were at home. Now they're going to have to play, a neutral site in Omaha. I think the other thing for Connor Noland and for Arkansas's entire pitching staff is Charles Schwab Field in Omaha is notorious for being a pitcher-friendly park. So, I mean, when you've got a guy who is pitching so well right now, of course, that start against North Carolina the other day was just fantastic with 6 2/3 innings and no runs given up. I mean, that's kind of an ideal situation where you've got a guy who's both playing well and now he gets to come into a ballpark that is going to help him even more.
Robbie, when you look back, at the schedules and what the teams have done, you see Arkansas and Stanford played earlier this year. Stanford won that game 5-0. Hagen Smith was a young freshman pitcher in that game, but that seems like 10 seasons ago at this point. How much stock or how much analysis should we put into a game that happened in Houston at the beginning of the year to what will happen Saturday up in Omaha?
Yeah, I would say not much because, well, for a number of reasons. In college baseball in general, not only did that game take place almost 4 months ago, but the hitting conditions completely changed from, so that game was on February 27th. I know it was in Texas, but, this just isn't the same in terms of how the ball is going to fly around and all that sort of stuff. You may not be hitting a lot of home runs in Omaha, but still there's going to be the ability that there are big gaps in that park. You can at least get some doubles and extra base hits. So I wouldn't really, it's the same thing with Arkansas where, I think they're a different team from even like a month ago. So I would not put any stock, honestly, in anything that happens before the start of April.
Yeah, it was 56 degrees that day. I think we would take that part of the equation compared to what it's going to be like in Omaha. Ty was mentioning teams and wanting to be there, and Arkansas is making their 11th trip as a program, their 5th trip in the last 9 College World Series. Some, like Notre Dame, are making their 3rd trip ever. In your mind, is there a difference between some of these programs and the ones that maybe are prepared or have prepared the last few years to go win a national title, and then some of these that just getting to the College World Series is kind of meeting the expectation or the satisfaction? Who there do you think is really honed in on the national championship more so than the experience in Omaha?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm picking Arkansas, actually, is you can just look back at, for instance, Mississippi State last year. That's a team that had been knocking on the door for quite a while. They had come up short in the College World Series a number of times, and I think getting there and coming up short, and even, I know that Arkansas didn't make it to CWS last season, but even making deep runs in the postseason, having those expectations of getting there and possibly winning the national championship, when you come up short, I think that kind of toughens up the team, and I think it really helps. There's not a lot of teams in sports in general that just break out one season, become contenders immediately, and roll all the way through and win the whole thing. I think it really helps to come up short once or twice, and generally that's necessary before you end up winning the whole thing. Whereas, for instance, Notre Dame would be probably the best example. Oklahoma hasn't been to the College World Series in I think over 10 years. Whereas Arkansas and Texas, which is the team that I like out of the left side of the bracket, Texas was in Omaha last season, and it's possible they barely got beaten by Mississippi State, and if they advanced to the finals last year, I think they probably would have beaten Vanderbilt because Vandy was kind of on their last legs at that point.
Robbie,
so I think it makes a big difference.
Let's go off that point. I know Arkansas fans would love the idea of matching up with the Texas Longhorns in the national championship. You saw it in the Super Regional. The Razorback softball team came up short. You could see it here in Omaha. I wonder from your vantage point, is that an appealing national championship to a wide college baseball base, or is that more just between Texas and Arkansas? Does that have a national appeal to it, in your opinion?
That's a good question. I think it does to some extent, but I also still think that the game of college baseball is still growing to the point where I'm not sure that any national championship pairing is truly going to draw everybody in at this point. I think at this point where the sport is, people want to watch the team that they're a fan of, and they'll drop everything. There's not a lot else going on in sports this time of year, and they'll drop everything to watch the College World Series or whatever if it's their team playing in it. If it's not one of their teams playing, and there's only two teams in the finals, naturally. I don't know about the wide appeal, but yeah, for people who are big college baseball fans in general, I think that would be a very entertaining series. And of course, you guys know better than anyone else that those two programs don't really like each other just in general in terms of athletic departments, and it's a long storied rivalry. So I think it would be highly entertaining to really good teams, and I would love that personally.
Robbie, Arkansas fans know their players, they know their coaches, they know their team, but they might not have a great grasp of teams outside of the SEC ones in Omaha. Who are some other players that Arkansas, specifically on their side of the bracket, need to be monitoring, and maybe even on Stanford that you could give us a glimpse of?
Yeah, so Stanford, I would imagine, starting pitchers haven't been announced yet, but I would imagine they're going to be able to roll out their number one starter for that game on Saturday, Alex Williams. He did not have a good start against UConn, so he can be hit, but he has a 2.88 ERA on the season. He's one of the best pitchers still going in this tournament, and he last pitched on Saturday, so it'll be normal rest for him, and I would imagine that's who they go to. The guy that a lot of people talk about with Stanford is Brock Jones, who has a lot of power. He has hit 20 home runs this season, hitting .327. Carter Graham also is a guy with 22 home runs, 78 RBIs. So, Stanford has a whole bunch of guys who hit 300 or better. They're a very talented team. There's a reason they're at the number 2 overall seed in this tournament and the highest-ranked team left. But, I would say, like I said, they almost got beat by Texas State in regionals, and then UConn kind of had them on the ropes. So I think they're vulnerable, but that's who I would look at probably on Arkansas' side of the bracket. Of course, Sonny DeShera from Auburn, I think Arkansas fans know all about him. But, Ole Miss and Auburn, the other two teams on Arkansas' side of the bracket, Hogs fans are going to be very familiar with those two opponents.
When you look at the bracket and kind of the way it's shaped and got these 8 teams to Omaha, only 2 of the teams in the Super Regionals won at home. The other 6 were road winners in the Super Regional. Only 2 of the top 8 national seeds survived and got to Omaha. Does that speak to parity in college baseball, or did the committee put too much weight on the entire year in RPI? What happened when you only get 2 of the top 8 national seeds to Omaha? Was this a miss by the committee, or is it just chalk it up to that's baseball?
Probably a little bit of both. I think the reliance on RPI is probably outdated at this point. We've seen the men's basketball committee, and also the women's basketball committee, go away from that at this point. And there's no, the college football playoff committee doesn't use RPI or whatever the equivalent would be. I think there's more to it than just the RPI. But I would also say this tournament has a long history of being wacky and wild. I mean, how long has it been since? I think the number one seed overall has only won the tournament, at least in the current format, going back to 1999. I think that's the last time, I'm pretty sure. So this is, it's well known for being a crazy tournament. And I think we all expected Tennessee to still be playing right now. But, I would probably chalk it up more to that. This is a weird sport. Especially this time of year, a lot of these games are very high scoring, and teams run out of pitchers sometimes in regionals in particular. So I'd point to that probably because this kind of always happens,
Yeah. And your thoughts on the kind of the change in the format, starting a day earlier on the Friday, getting it to where the following weekend begins the championship round and the best of three. A pretty noted shift in the schedule and the formatting. Still the two regionals essentially, followed by a super regional at its very simplest form, but they've compressed the time to some degree to get it in about a 10-day period.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll find out how it affects things this coming week. But what I hope is that there is. Of course, it feels like every year there's a lot of rain delays and everything gets squashed together. So I would hope that, hopefully they have a good plan for that and that doesn't affect things too much, because what you don't want to see is too many teams having to play twice in the same day. That's always, I just want every team to have a decent amount of arms available for all these games, because that's when it starts getting, to the point where I wouldn't say, of course, the best team is not always going to win, but you want every team to have a fighting chance. We'll see on the format. I mean, I don't really have a true hot take on that until we see how, if or how it affects things this coming week.
Robbie, we'll leave it there. Enjoy your weekend in Omaha, Nebraska at the College World Series, and we will talk later on, man.
Yeah, thanks. Really appreciate you guys having me, and as you said, I really like Arkansas to make a deep run, so I'm sure you guys will have plenty to talk about over the next 2 weeks.
Love hearing that this morning. That is Robbie Weinstein of 24/7 Sports, covers college baseball and
partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA playoffs, fights, and even next season's futures. And don't forget that the MLB is back as well. Who are you picking to win the World Series? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.